Today on Inside Utah Politics, school start times. One lawmaker says they should be pushed back so students can get more sleep. Representative Suzanne Harrison is here to discuss that and other bills she's working on for the upcoming session. Plus, tax reform hits the spotlight on Utah's Capitol Hill. Our panel debates the pros and cons and weighs in on why all the candidates for governor are against the bill.
Time now for Inside Utah Politics.
Good Sunday morning. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Glenn Mills. It is time to go inside Utah politics, and we begin this morning with State Representative Suzanne Harrison. Representative, great to have you on the show. Thanks so much for being here with us this morning.
Thank you for having me, Glenn.
A very important issue. It's something we looked at the state legislature a couple of years ago, but you are running a resolution on school start times. A resolution meaning it's not binding, so what would it do?
Again, yeah, it's not a mandate. It simply asks local districts to have the conversation about healthy kids. Our teenagers are not getting enough sleep, and every year there's more and more medical evidence showing that this chronic lack of sleep is really hurting their health, their academic performance, and even increasing their risk of suicide and car accidents.
So let's dig into this a little more. Our kids go to Corner Canyon. They start at 7:30 a.m. What are we looking at that you would like to see?
I would like to see local districts have that conversation about the pros and cons. Obviously, any change in a system is difficult, and it would involve systems working together to find solutions for transportation and adjustments for extracurricular activities. But those districts that have made those changes, and something as simple as swapping the start time for elementary and high school students to let our high schoolers get a little bit more sleep, they are seeing real benefits in terms of grades and less absences and improved mental health and less substance abuse. And this really matches their biology. Anyone who's ever tried to wake up a teenager in the morning knows it's nearly impossible. It's not that they're lazy, it's their biology is different than adults, and they have a shift in their circadian rhythm to really, they're programmed to fall asleep later and wake up later.
A couple of interesting points there. One, swapping elementary school and high school. So what studies have shown you is that elementary school students are better off getting an early start than high school students. That's interesting.
And certainly that's just one option that districts could look at. I'm not interested in mandating what the solution is. I'm asking local districts to look at the research, look at the pros and cons of shifting school start times. Even just a little bit can have a huge impact on the amount of sleep our kids are getting. And there's some studies to back this up that the kids are actually getting more sleep when the school start time shifts.
One other point I want to bring up, when you get into the real world as adults, those things are still there. Life starts early, we're stressed out, we're sleep deprived, but you say it's all about healthy brain development at that age, and that's what this is about.
Exactly. And I think sometimes we have in our culture, this is a character building, get up and early and get at them, and that works for adults. But teenagers are in a unique phase of their development and their biology, and their development is different in that their sleep schedule and priorities and needs are different than adults or young children.
Any concern at all of that carrying over, though? Once you get out of high school and then all of a sudden, wanting the world to wait for you to get started. Any concern there?
Well, and I certainly think we all, make that spectrum of growing up into adults, and sometimes it seems to shift later and later, but certainly by early 20s that an adult has fully developed brain, and the sleep requirements are a little bit different.
Okay, sounds good. Let's move on to another important issue that you are working on, and that is affordable and quality childcare. Talk about the need, because that's a really crucial element for families, especially those that are struggling to get by in Utah.
This is a huge problem for so many families, especially those middle income families that they need to be able to work outside the home to pay the rent and pay the bills. We live in one of the most unaffordable areas for childcare in terms of access to childcare, and many of our counties have not even a single licensed childcare provider in the whole county. And this is a challenge for families that need to find quality childcare for their kids while they go to work or engage with educational opportunities. The bill I'm working on is simply an employer tax credit. So employers that choose to subsidize care for employees or offer care on site for employees during work hours can apply to get a portion of that investment back in the form of a tax credit to hopefully improve and increase the number of childcare spots available in Utah and help with the affordability issue to help families be able to afford that
So
care.
that would be targeted at the private sector?
Correct.
Not the state, okay.
Correct.
I hear so many people tell me, you know, we take a look at this and you start to add up what childcare costs, and it's almost not even worth working because that's how much money it's taking out. And obviously that could potentially have impact on the workforce and our economy as well.
Exactly. This is a workforce development issue. We have one of the tightest job markets in the country. Every employer I talk to cannot find qualified, skilled workforce, and if we can do something to help those workers overcome some of these barriers to entering the workforce and making sure their kids are taken care of in the meantime, it could really help with our employee shortage.
You are a physician, a doctor, so I really would like your perspective on this, and it's something you're working on as well. Reducing healthcare costs, sky high, out of control. How do you go about doing that?
It's a huge problem, and I hear from patients, my patients every day, that they can't afford to see the doctor or certainly can't afford the medications that they're taking. And one area I'm really focused on is prescription drugs and how do we reduce the costs for families for that. I'm working on legislation to encourage our federal government to unshackle ourselves. We are one of the only countries in the world that prohibits our government from negotiating with drug manufacturers to demand lower prices. And for Medicare especially, that is ludicrous that we are handcuffing ourselves and paying the highest drug prices in the world because we're not negotiating for cheaper prices. This resolution encourages the federal government to do something about it to help seniors, and also it will help taxpayers in the form of cheaper medications.
A conversation we have every year, and we always talk about the need, but we don't really see the needle moving a lot. So how can you actually put that into action, especially with the resolution?
Yeah. Well, that resolution is for the federal level, but I'm also working on a legislation here at the state level that increases the purchasing power and allows the public employees health plan to pool their purchasing power with the public employees health plans of other states to increase the numbers, so to speak, and leverage for cheaper prices and negotiate for cheaper prices for medications. That again will help taxpayers because we're ultimately paying those costs for public employee health plans. And anytime there's leverage down in terms of prices, that can ripple out and hopefully decrease prices for everyone.
Okay, we have about a minute left. Another important thing that you've been working on, I assume this is again with your connection of being a physician, is our air quality. Tier 3 gas is one thing that's coming along, but you are taking some other steps this year as well.
Absolutely. This is something that everyone cares about, and it impacts our health and threatens our economic future if we don't address our air quality. One project I'm working on is to identify where consumers can purchase that cleaner burning, lower sulfur Tier 3 gasoline that can drastically reduce polluting emissions from our cars.
I just saw you about a week ago at the new Speedway that was opening up, and we saw those locations pop up throughout the state.
Absolutely. So not all of our refineries have chosen to make this cleaner burning gasoline, and I think this is an opportunity for consumers to use our purchasing power to clean up the air by choosing to buy gasoline from those gas stations that are choosing to buy that cleaner burning gasoline. It will cost about the same, and I'm working to put together a list to allow for consumers to know where that is. And I'm working on a bill file also to allow for a sales tax credit, a sales tax break for people that are going to step up and buy affordably priced electric vehicles and plug-in electric hybrids or lease them.
Okay, I know my understanding is on the Tier 3 gasoline, if it's a Tier 3 car, it'll burn 80% cleaner, but even if it's not, if it's an older vehicle, it's still like 15% cleaner. And everyone doing that, I mean, that starts to add up.
It can make a huge difference. If you're not already driving an electric vehicle or using transit every day, this is something simple you can do to dramatically reduce our particulate pollution and clean up our air.
Okay, Representative, great to have you on the show. Thanks so much for being here, and we will follow these bills as the session plays out.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. Still to come, as open enrollment comes to a close for the Obamacare marketplace, we're going to take a closer look at the controversial law. Is it working for Utahns? Our panel debates. But first, Congress makes a move to save minor league baseball. How they're going about it after the break. Stay with us. Students, parents, and teachers from all across the country traveled to the White House to talk to President Trump himself about opportunities to expand high-quality education to more schools. Washington correspondent Jesse Tenor reports on the administration's plan to provide school choice for every student.
Now is the time to fight for the forgotten child.
President Trump sat down with students, parents, and teachers at the White House Monday to talk about their common goal, school choice.
A lot of kids that I grew up with were either in prison or ended up shot and killed somewhere. I had a way to get out of that and a way to escape, and it was through my education.
Walter Blanks and other students at the roundtable told President Trump they want all children to have the option to choose the public, private, or charter school that's right for them.
I was able to fit in.
Sam Meyer's mom, Tara, says school choice is important because every student learns differently.
He was not even being given the opportunity to learn how to read.
The Trump administration's Education Freedom Scholarships proposal would allow individuals and companies to donate money to a scholarship fund and receive a federal tax credit. Rebecca Friedrichs, a retired teacher, thinks it could be life-changing.
There's never been a national move to try to provide school choice for every child.
Opponents of school choice argue, why not funnel that money into the public schools that need it, with concerns that this is a push to privatize education. But the Trump administration says that's not the case.
Absolutely not. This is a effort to empower students and parents.
Joe Grogan, the director of the White House Domestic Policy Council, argues the scholarship proposal doesn't take away any money from the Department of Education.
This is additional resources that would go directly to parents and students.
Now Congress has to decide whether to support it. In Washington, I'm Jesse Tenor.
Congress is throwing heat at Major League Baseball to strike out a plan to cut more than 40 minor league teams from the MLB farm system. Without support from the big league, the teams are likely to fold, leaving smaller cities and towns all around the country with an empty ballpark. Washington correspondent Morgan Wright reports on the increase of congressional efforts to save the teams.
Minor league baseball is so important to many small cities across the country.
But it's at risk of striking out. New York Congressman Anthony Brindisi warns 42 minor league teams could lose their major league affiliation if the MLB has its way.
And I think if we work together here, we can actually come up with a compromise.
Brindisi is ramping up efforts to save those teams like the Binghamton Rumble Ponies and his home New York district. The team could lose their affiliation with the New York Mets. The issue has drawn the ire of many on Capitol Hill, including Senate Democratic leader Chuck Schumer.
Major League Baseball comes to us for certain things, and now we're coming to them.
Schumer says he intends to fight to save the teams. Lawmakers have also established the Save Minor League Baseball Task Force.
I encourage Major League Baseball to sit down with these clubs, work with them to address any concerns.
2020 presidential candidate Bernie Sanders has also cried foul. He hit back at that proposal, saying it would be an absolute disaster for baseball fans, workers, and communities throughout the country. MLB responded to Sanders, saying they're committed to negotiating with minor league baseball to find solutions that balance the competing interests of local communities, MLB clubs, and minor league owners. Lawmakers say they plan to monitor the negotiations and progress very closely. Reporting in Washington, Morgan Wright.
So to come, articles of impeachment and an agreement on the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement all on the same day? A coincidence? Our panel debates after the break.
You're watching Inside Utah Politics.
Time now to debate some of the big stories of the week with the Inside Utah Politics panel. This week we have former State Representative Rebecca Chavez-Houck and State Representative Corey Malloy. Great to have both of you on the show. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Pleasure.
Let's start off with tax reform. I mentioned your former representative, but if you were still up there, would you have voted for that bill?
I would not have voted for that bill.
Why?
You know, the last time we tackled this in a large way was in 2007 when under the Huntsman administration the legislature took a look at income tax, flattened that out. And I came in the session, I was elected the session after that. So seeing the unintended consequences of that particular action, I have some concerns about, in particular, the sales tax on food, the fact that they haven't reconciled issues related to the education funding and the tax funding that goes towards that. So, you know, it's a very hard thing to tackle that large of a scope of reform. And even just looking at my past experience with what happened when we did income tax revisions and the consequences of that, I don't think it's ready for prime time. And I also doubt whether it needs to be as rigorous as it's being presented.
Representative Malloy, this is something you said. You went right up to the wire on trying to decide what to do. What are things you like about it?
Well, I love the tax reduction. It's a $160 million tax reduction for the taxpayers of Utah. That's significant. And so when you look at that, there are other areas that I'm not quite as happy with, but you know, but that's because I don't like to see taxes going up anywhere. But the reality is that we have some areas where in the sales tax area where taxes are going to go up. But I think overall, the tax burden on the taxpayer is going to be lower on the taxpayer, and I think that's very significant.
Let's focus in on the education part of it, because right now income tax is earmarked for education. Yeah. We're talking about that reduction in income tax, so we keep hearing that education is to be held harmless, but how can you make that guarantee?
I know that's a good question, Glenn, and that's the one that I pose as to how are they going to reconcile when we continually have growth in enrollment, have challenges with keeping teachers and retaining teachers as their workforce, and not having reconciled what they plan to do as an offset to assure that our education needs are being met. That's my concern.
Any thoughts on that? Because that's one of the things you really like about the bill.
Well, definitely, nothing will change as far as where the income tax will go. It's still going to be totally earmarked for education. Higher education will come out of that education fund, so that's going to free up more money for K through 12, and then higher education will be in the general fund. So we'll definitely need to make sure that we can still fund higher education. But I don't think anybody, from the governor throughout the entire legislature, is going to let education funding drop. In fact, I think there's talks and discussions about how we can keep the momentum going on funding education.
One interesting element I've been watching on this is how all of the gubernatorial candidates are responding to this. All of them coming out and saying, you know, in no such words, this isn't going to work and we shouldn't be moving that direction. What do you make of that when you see Republican gubernatorial candidates all coming out, including the lieutenant governor, saying this is not the way to go?
Well, they're the ones that are going to have to execute the budgets. And so I think that they're looking at down the pike what this looks like in terms of revenue streams. Is this really the best way to address concerns related to declining sales tax revenues? There may be other things that could be done. So that they're looking, I would believe, as an executive, somebody that's looking to be elected as chief executive of the state, is how are they going to do, provide the services that the state needs, manage for growth. I know that former Governor Huntsman has really been focusing on growth as one of his pillars. That's probably where he's looking at it through that lens.
Any thoughts on that, Representative, especially when you see the lieutenant governor breaking from the governor? I imagine they talked about that in advance and, you know, talked about, hey, I've got to go this direction on this. But what about that element of this?
Well, Lieutenant Governor Cox, he did mention that he talked to the governor, so I'm assuming they did have, I have no idea what they actually talked about. But I think it's fair to say that all of these gubernatorial candidates have a platform that they're going to be pushing. They have thoughts on not only tax policy, but education policy. They're going to have their own ideas. They're going to have some ideas that go along party lines. So it'll be interesting to see, and I think it also brings us to the point where it talks to that we're not done doing the best things we can for the people of Utah, whether it's tax policy or education. I think everybody is going to have the desire to do the best thing for the people, and it'll be interesting to see how all that comes out.
Yeah, I think that'll probably be a big talking point on the campaign trail as we get closer to the governor's race there. Let's move on to the Affordable Care Act. Today is the last day for open enrollment. During 2019, more than 194,000 Utahns had a plan on the exchange. Is it working for the state of Utah?
I think it is, and I think it's kind of like that whole starfish analogy. If it works for that one person, it's good for them because they were able to get the health care that they needed. Now, I spoke to some folks over at the Utah Health Policy Project, and they were talking about people that were coming in to enroll. One person in particular was telling their story of how, yes, their premium had gone up, but over the last year they had suffered a severe medical condition that dealt with their heart, and if it hadn't been for the fact that they had had that coverage, they would have been in a much worse spot, maybe their life. It would have affected their living. So I think that people appreciate having that stopgap, having the ability with the Affordable Care Act to go onto the marketplace, to enroll and to get affordable insurance to provide for their family and their own needs. And it's good to see that the enrollment numbers are staying pretty static from last year.
Yeah, actually in the state of Utah, the numbers are greater than what we thought they would have been when this whole program started. Representative Moy, let's bring you in. This is something Republicans have really had a hard time with. It's a very controversial law, still in the courts, looking to overturn it. Do you believe it's working for the state of Utah?
Well, I think at this point I have to assume that it does play an important role as far as the mix of all the options. We expanded Medicare. This becomes an option as well as traditional insurance policies that you get through your job as a benefit or you purchase yourself. So I think right now, where we're at today, it plays a good mix, and so it is helping people. I think there are people who are still not able to get what they get, but I think it's part of that good mix overall.
A lot of uncertainty around this law. Republicans during the year were unsuccessful in trying to overturn it, but what impact does that have on this as we move forward? And is it a good idea for the Democratic Party to pass a bill like that when they are in power and then just go in this cycle where we overturn and come up with something new? Is that good for the country?
Well, we're almost at 10 years. I mean, we look at 2012 when the final ruling came down from the Supreme Court upholding it. I think with every year, I have to look at it at an individual basis and in a population health basis, and for people to be able to access the health that they need that may have not got that coverage previously. You do what you can. A lot of the stuff that we do or that policymakers do, you can't make those decisions based on the fact that 5 years from now, 10 years from now, it may not be there because we're changing policy all the time. Economics drives those changes. The needs of the community may affect changes. So I think that moving it forward, I think the fact that people got covered and people are healthy is the most important thing we need to look at.
Representative Malloy, your thoughts on that? Is it good to keep going back and forth as the pendulum swings in Washington?
Well, I think it really depends on the issues. I mean, we see that pendulum swinging in a lot of different policy issues. So I think it really, what is best, again, for the people that drives that. So hopefully you get to a medium that works for the people. And I think the Republicans have an issue with it because, it kind of goes against the free market way of thinking and, capitalism. And it costs a lot of money. I think the carriers who are helping implement the program have done a great job. And they've really put their businesses on the line and out front to provide these services for people. But it costs a lot of money. It costs them money, it costs the customers money, it costs the taxpayers money.
Okay, we have about a minute left, so I want to stop there and get to one other thing real quick. We're going to combine two things, articles of impeachment and the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement, both coming out on the same day. I always say there are no coincidences in politics. Is this a situation where one is trying to maybe distract from the other? Let's start with you.
I would argue that what happened there, in my estimation, is that the speakers saw a lot of concerns from the community or from the public saying, why are you focusing on this and not getting things done? This is the House majority's effort to try to get something done, to continue to govern, as they've been called to do, at the same time that they also hold to account part of the work that their job is as the legislative branch to hold the executive branch to account. So.
Representative Moy, the last 30 seconds are yours.
I think that's exactly right. I mean, since day one, they've been on a witch hunt against Trump, and so every time they announce something related to the impeachment of President Trump, they have to throw something in it. This isn't the first time that they've done that. So they have a bad problem. The American people don't think they're working on anything but trying to get rid of Trump.
Okay, we're going to have to end it right there. Great conversation. Always enjoy having the two of you on. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with more Inside Utah Politics right after the break. Got through quite a few. We leave you now with a look at what's on the radar in the world of politics. The general legislative session begins next month. The 45-day session opens up on January 27th. Utah is participating in Super Tuesday for the presidential primary. That is set for Tuesday, March 3rd. And caucus night for both Utah Republicans and Democrats is Tuesday, March 24th. Make sure to connect with me on social media. I'd like to know what you think of this show and other issues that are important to you. You can email me at InsideUtahPolitics@abc4.com. You can also follow me on Twitter and Facebook. Just log on and search Glenn Mills ABC4. Thanks so much for making us part of your Sunday morning. We hope to see you again next week as we go inside Utah politics.